Hi Year 10, we are looking at statistics today and we're reviewing statistics by looking at displaying data. So a visual display of data is useful in giving an overall impression. The most common ways to display data is by graphing them in a frequency histogram and polygon, a cumulative frequency histogram and polygon, a dot plot, a box plot, or a stem and leaf plot. Today what we are going to look at is a frequency histogram and polygon and a cumulative frequency histogram and polygon. We're going to leave the dot plot, box plot and stem and leaf plot for a future time. Let's look at the frequency histogram first. So we're going to use the frequency distribution table to construct a frequency histogram. This frequency distribution table is from a previous video when we looked at sorting data. And we're going to use the exact same table throughout the entire video today to show how to graph a frequency histogram, a frequency polygon, a cumulative histogram, a cumulative polygon. So the first step is to look at our axes over here. We have our horizontal axis, which is our outcome, and our vertical axis, which is going to hold our frequency. So we need to put values along our axis. So for our horizontal axis, our outcomes, we need to write our outcomes of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 along that horizontal axis. Then to work out what our frequency outcomes are, we need to look at our frequency column and look at what is our highest frequency. Our highest frequency is 4, so we just need to start at 0 and work our way up to 4. So it will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 for good measure. Now, it is really important when drawing a frequency histogram that we leave off this first gap here. So we leave half a space to start off with. We also draw our frequency histogram as a column graph. So what we do is we look at our first outcome of 1 and its frequency of 4. We go up to 4 and we draw a column graph like so, using a ruler to get nice and straight columns. We then go to our outcome of 2 and it has a frequency of 3. So we draw our line across to make a column of 3, a frequency of 3. As you can see with our frequency histogram, our columns are in fact touching. We then have our outcome of 3 and it has a frequency of 2. Our outcome of 4 has a frequency of 1. Our outcome of 5 has a frequency of 3. And our outcome of 6 also has a frequency of 3. Oops, that should be a flat line. And our outcome of 7 has a frequency of 4. So that is our frequency histogram. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at our frequency polygon. So the frequency polygon is a dot that where we put our dot above where our outcome is. So again, we need to write our outcomes along the base here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and our frequency of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 going up. So for our frequency polygon, what we do is we start at our 0. So our 0 is here. We put a dot at 0 and we always start where the two axes meet. Then we look at our outcome of 1 and it has a frequency of 4. So from our 1, we go up to 4 and then we put a dot there. We then look at our outcome of 2. It has a frequency of 3. So we go up and we put a dot at 3. We have our outcome of 3 has a frequency of 2. Our outcome of 4 has a frequency of 1. Our outcome of 5 has a frequency of 3. Our outcome of 6 has a frequency of 3. And our outcome of 7 has a frequency of 4. We then look at where our next outcome would be and we put a dot back on the line there. So that's where our 8th outcome would be. We then get a ruler and we connect these lines using straight lines, doing a dot to dot like so. there we have our frequency polygon. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at putting our frequency histogram and our frequency polygon together on the same graph. So we need to write our outcomes, down along the bottom here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and our frequency going up the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to draw my frequency histogram exactly the same as how I did it in my previous. So outcome 1 had a frequency of 4, then we had a frequency of 3. Really important that we're using our rulers here to make sure we get nice straight lines and columns for our graph. Okay, now once we've drawn our frequency histogram, it's time to draw our polygon. So with our polygon, we do our dots in exactly the same spot, but you will notice that it's on the top line in the middle of our graph, or of our columns, like so. And then we line them up. Using a ruler, of course. Like so. So it's really important to know that the frequency of each score is represented by a column in the histogram and a dot in the polygon. These dots coincide with the center top of each column. The dots are joined to form the polygon, which is completed by joining to the axis as shown in what we did. So what we can do here is we can then identify our mode by the highest column. So just like we looked at our mode by looking at our frequency, our mode is our highest column, so it would be 1 and 7, exactly like the last video. And we can see the spread of scores. We can easily see any outliers, and for group data, the classes can be represented on the horizontal axis by the class centers. So if you get asked to graph class data, instead of writing the outcomes here, you would do your class centers. Okay, now what we're going to look at is cumulative frequency histograms. So we're going to use the exact same frequency histogram, frequency distribution table, to construct a cumulative frequency histogram. So what I've done is I've already written my outcomes along my horizontal axis, and I've written my cumulative frequency along my vertical axis. So what we're doing is we're looking at this column here, our cumulative frequency column, and we're going to use that column and our outcome column to create a histogram. So our first, what we're going to do is our first outcome of 1 has a cumulative frequency of 4. Now we still leave our gap between the first half, and so we're going to do 1 up to 4. And I was going to do this using nice straight lines. We're using a ruler here. Awesome. Then we have outcome 2 has a cumulative frequency of 7. So we're drawing nice straight lines. Oh, that's not a straight line. Using our ruler to make our histogram. Then we have our outcome of 3 has a cumulative frequency of 9. So again, nice and straight, like so. Then we have our outcome of 4 has a cumulative frequency of 10. So we need a column that goes up to 10. Like so. And then what we have is our outcome of 5 has a cumulative frequency of 13. Oh, that's meant to be straight. And then finally we have our outcome of 6 has a cumulative frequency of 16. And our outcome of 7 has a cumulative frequency of 20. So as you can see with our graph, oh, whoa. Once we draw it properly, nice straight line with our frequency histogram, or cumulative frequency histogram, each column gets slightly bigger, and the distance it gets slightly bigger is by the frequency. So we have a frequency of 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 3, and 4. So it's slightly getting bigger each time. Now we're going to use the frequency distribution table to construct a cumulative frequency polygon. So with our cumulative frequency polygon this time, what is happening is it's going to start at where our column graph would start for our outcome of 1. Then it's going to go to the top corner. So it's going to go to in line with the next, where the gap is, of our cumulative frequency. So it's going to go there for our 4. Then for our outcome of 2, it has a cumulative frequency of 7. So it's like going over 1. It will make more sense when we look at the cumulative frequency polygon on top of the cumulative frequency histogram in a couple of seconds. And we have our outcome of 3 goes in our top corner there. Outcome of 4 with 10. Outcome of 5 is 13. Nice big dot. Outcome of 6 is 16. And our outcome of 7 is 20. Now what we want to do is we want to connect these dots using a ruler and to make straight lines. Like so. Alrighty, and then we don't come back down. Okay, and finally, what we want to do is we want to use the frequency distribution table to construct a cumulative frequency histogram and polygon all on the same graph. So I'm going to do exactly what I did for cumulative frequency histogram and the cumulative frequency polygon in the previous 2 slides, but just put it on this graph. So I look at my outcome of 1, it has a cumulative frequency of 4. So I draw my column going up to 4, like so. Oh, that's not very straight. Then I look at my next outcome of 2. It has a cumulative frequency of 7. My next outcome of 3 has a cumulative frequency of 9. My next outcome of 4 has a cumulative frequency of 10. My next outcome of 5 has a cumulative frequency of 13. Now make sure you're still using your ruler. Awesome. And then my next outcome of 6 has a cumulative frequency of 16. And finally, my last outcome of 7 has a cumulative frequency of 20. Now, what we want to do with our polygon is we want to do our dots at the corners. So we start at this bottom corner here, and then we go across to the other, far right corner. So the polygon is formed by joining the corners of adjoining columns as shown. Okay, so we're always doing our dot at the top of the column on the right hand side, and then we are adjoining our dots together using a ruler and a straight line, like so. So for our cumulative frequency histogram and polygon, we're graphing the cumulative frequency results in columns of increasing height and the last column representing the total frequency. The polygon is formed by joining the corners of adjoining columns as shown, and this polygon is useful for indicating the median and quartiles, and that's what we're going to quickly look at now. So if I wanted to calculate the median, what I'd be doing is I'd be looking at where my middle half of scores is. So my middle of this graph is where would be between my 10th and my 11th score. So what I want to do is I want to go across and I want to see where it lands. So when I go across at my 10th score, it lands right in the middle of my outcomes of 4 and 5. So that means my median is in between 4 and 5, which is 4.5, which if you remember back to our previous video on sorting data, when we looked at the median using this table, that was what we got. Now, if I was to look at what my quartile, or what my, I'm just trying to think of a color, yellow. So my Q1 looks like. So Q1 is half of my first lot of scores. So half of 10 is 5. So I go across at 5. So we're breaking this into quarters and down. And wherever it hits my polygon is what my Q1 equals. So that goes down and hits in the column of 2. So my Q1 is equal to 2. And finally, my Q3, I will do in pink. And my Q3, what that is my middle of my second half of scores. So I go across at 15 to wherever it hits my polygon and down, and that is at 6. So my Q3 is equal to 6. Now what you could do here is then go a little step further and you could work out your interquartile range just for a little bit of revision purposes. So my interquartile range is my Q3 minus my Q1, so that is 6 minus 2. So my interquartile range here equals 4.